All right, take 2.
Podcast episode 5. I swear we've done more than that. Is this the 5th?
This is... No.
Why have I labelled it 5?
This is technically... Well, because we've only uploaded 4, right? Onto YouTube.
But we've got another.
There's a backlog of, I think, about 2 or 3 more.
Let's say 7.
This might be like 8.
Cool. Well, this time we're trying something different, right? So we're taking a different approach to this podcast. And we're going to we've picked out some talking points. We've done a bit of research. We've gathered research from a range of sources so we can kind of explain to you guys where we found this information from. And the reason was because we were deciding what our viewers wanted to see the most, and the way that we did that was by looking at videos that did well. So,
all right, before we dive into that,
sure.
There's a bit of housekeeping that we're going to deal with first. Okay. Now, first of all, because you're managing the TikTok, but I'm keeping an eye on the YouTube and Insta.
Yeah.
And there's some comments and stuff on there that really need your attention.
Such as?
I'm going to give it to you now. So, I don't know if you remember, there was a clip last week, or maybe whenever it was, of you talking about something to do with race and saying, I don't see color.
Yeah.
Fair enough comment. But then one of the viewers had some input on that.
Sure.
And they said, I always love when people say, I don't see color. I have black friends, yellow friends, white friends, but I don't see color. Wrong. Everyone sees color. If you feel like you have to say, I don't see color, it tells me exactly what I need to know. If you don't see color, you wouldn't have to go around telling people you don't see color. You would engage in this conversation where you literally separate people into groups based on their color. You see color, everyone colors, and everyone is racist at some point in their life. It just depends on the day.
Okay, that's a very smart comment. Well done, whoever left that one. It's an interesting hypothesis, right? It's by saying you don't see colour, you're immediately racist. I don't know about that. Maybe pushing the boat out a little bit there.
Yeah.
The way I view it is that I give everyone equal chance when I meet them, regardless of the colour of their skin.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I meant by I don't see colour.
Obviously,
I can see. I'm not colourblind.
I do think this commenter was being a little pedantic. Because you're not literally saying, I can't distinguish between different shades of colour.
Yeah, I don't think everyone that said, I don't see colour is racist.
That's right. And it was more like the metaphorical sense of, I don't differentiate people based on their colour.
That's it. You got to give everyone... I'm not a very hateful person. I don't hold a lot of hate in my heart. But I do enjoy picking apart why things are how they are, which is kind of the point of this episode today. Obviously, we'll have some fun. We'll go around the issues as well and kind of give some opinions of them, which I've not really done. This is all going to be free flowing.
Yeah, that's what the audience loves. They love unprepared, uninformed, biased opinions.
That's it.
That's what we bring to the table.
Well, we're not educated on these issues. We didn't find them particularly interesting. I just like the conflict that I get from it. I find it really interesting how people refuse to talk about it, and you get labelled as a Nazi as soon as you bring it up. That was the point where I decided this was something that I was quite interested in because of the backlash that I got against saying something like that.
I get what you mean. All right, we'll go into this, but
sure.
Another point I want to just quickly clear up. I have a confession to make.
What's that?
So do you remember a week ago you burst in here and you're like, Ibrahim, give me the vape. And I said, I don't have it.
I knew you had the vape. I knew you had it.
I had it.
What, did you just keep it?
I still have it.
Nice. Have you not used it?
No, I have used it.
So you stole the vape from me.
But this was one of the few instances where I've genuinely lied and then had to backtrack. Be like, that was a poor move. Because you just came in hot and I didn't want to have to deal with standing my ground in that moment.
I knew that you hadn't lost it.
You seemed convinced in the...
I didn't know.
You were...
Because you don't usually lie. Hang on. Rewind. Yeah. You never lie anymore. You don't see the...
That's why I had to do this. Because I'm like...
So you're coming out.
Yeah, I'm absolving myself.
Okay.
Clean
I
slate.
don't forgive you. Don't lie to me again.
I wasn't asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for the viewers of forgiveness. The audience is the only thing that matters.
We bought a vape when we went out. We're not like serial vapists.
It's a problem. But Matt's got a much bigger problem. But anyway, now the record's clean, I'm feeling good, and the slate is clean. Okay.
Yeah, let's get into it. So
last one.
There's another one that you have for me. Please. I'm enjoying these so much.
Okay. I remember a while ago you said this quote on the pod. It was something like, once I did good and...
That I heard never.
Yeah.
Twice I did... No, once I did bad and that I heard never. Twice I did good. But that I heard... No. But
something like that.
Yeah.
I remember. And this one was kind of nagging at me. Because I'm like, this doesn't really make sense. And my reasoning is because whatever you've done, good or bad in the past, doesn't really matter. I think of it as day to day, moment to moment, that's what matters. What are you doing now? What have you just done? Whereas your track record or your history, like what you did last week, a month ago, is kind of irrelevant.
That's true, right? Well, irrelevant
how
is a bit
often
of
are
a
you gonna-
stretch.
Yeah, I would
Because
say it's the reasoning is you don't want to rest on your laurels. You don't be like, oh, but I did this thing.
But this is more about present praise or present criticism that you get from other people. So say you're in a management or a work situation and you're doing great things all the time, but nobody ever tells you that you're doing great things. You do one bad thing and you just never hear the end of it. The point is to praise people when they're doing as well as giving constructive criticism when they're doing poorly. And that's the whole point of the phrase. It's once I did bad and that I heard ever, twice I did good, but that I heard never. And it's about praising people for doing well and giving credit where credit's due, because it'll incentivize them to do that more.
That's true, actually. If someone is just doing what is expected of them, you don't usually praise them.
Yeah.
Because the expectation that this is what you have to do. And so you're basically never going to compliment them, apart from if they deviate from that and do something bad or not up to scratch.
This is something I've been playing with. I've been trying to give positive feedback to people that I care about, rather than trying to kind of pick apart the things that they're doing wrong. And the results have been quite impressive.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Nice.
I don't want to disclose, because otherwise if the people, you know what I'm going to do. The girl that I'm seeing at the moment,
Right.
I went and she tidied my room, and I didn't let her hear the end of it. Like I'd gone out of the room, went to work, and then I came back and the room was just spotless.
Okay.
Because she asked me a few days ago, like, what would be like a sexy thing that I could do for you? And I said, clean the room. She did it. I hadn't done it before, and I just gave her like endless praise for it. I just got back and said, like, just wanted to let you know, like, really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Like, when I came back from work, that made my day, just seeing everything laid out. You know, that's important to me, and it just changed my whole evening. So thank you. And then next time I left, she did it again.
It's funny how you can condition someone to do it, right?
Every time I leave, now my room's spotless. I'm not exaggerating.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
It's like that Pavlov's dog conditioning, where you say one thing and another person's conditioned to repeat that because they want the praise and the feedback.
Like in The Office, where it gives him a smint.
It's similar, right? It's not as direct.
But the way I might have phrased it before, and this is how it differs, is that had she not cleaned my room, or if she'd left it particularly messy, I might have come back and said, oh, you know, could you not have just put that away? Could you not have done that? And that's like criticising people for doing bad. But people immediately get defensive and put their guard up when they criticise. Whereas if you do manage to encourage people to do things that you want them to do, I just spat everywhere. If you do manage to encourage people to do things that you want them to do, and they do it, then you've got to praise them, and they're more likely to do it again. Which is the point of that.
It's such a simple thing, but
Yeah.
I suppose it speaks to that point, right, where people don't hear praise often enough, and so when they do hear it, it really sticks with them.
The point there, where I read it from, I can't remember where it was, or I might have listened to it in a podcast, was they compared it to a child being raised by his dad, and it was a real story about the guy, the author. He wrote about somebody that he knew that would always just criticise his son for doing bad things, for just being like a child, essentially, just having fun, you know, being a little bit reckless, and then just question himself about when he last praised his son. It was just all negative things, and that's probably going to have some pretty long-lasting effects on somebody if all you get is criticism when you're going through your childhood. I appreciate there's probably a limit to how beneficial it is. I think you see that all the time in today's society.
Or it can go to the other direction.
Yeah, and I think that's probably more of a problem now, right?
Yeah.
Potentially. I'm just, you know.
Man, there's so let's say you have this kid, and this kid is, you're giving him all the compliments, he's got a secure, happy environment to grow up in, right? And then I was thinking, let's say you have someone who's incredibly successful, let's say like a billionaire, right? Now, I'm thinking, what must your mind work like to get to that point where you're at, let's say, 100 million, more money than really is fathomable that you could spend in a lifetime, but you're like, no, this isn't enough. I still have something to prove. I still have somewhere to go. And you keep pushing and you even get to, let's say, half a billion, and you're like, this is good, but I'm still not satisfied. I still have something to prove, somewhere to go, to push myself to something, to a new level. And you keep going to obviously all these unimaginable heights, right, of wealth. And I think, where does that stem from? What must your internal dialogue or story be for you to think that at no point from, let's say, a few million to a billion was that sufficient for you? You still had to, I don't know, make some sense, or you had to satisfy some craving or need to achieve something, because there's this internal story that is so craving that satisfaction or validation.
Well, after you've made everything that I've heard people talk about is making their first million. Arnold Schwarzenegger talks about it in his book. He says, like, talks about making his first million, like, being the hardest thing that he did. After you've got £1 million, you can pay for advice. You can pay for like people to consult you in ways to make you more money. You can invest some of that money and be a bit more liberal with it, because you probably don't need it as much as you did on your journey to making that first million. So maybe the hunger isn't quite as much once you've made it, but it's actually just a lot easier to continue to make money once you have it, which would also explain why the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, right? If you've got 7 properties, and an extra property is going to be easier to buy than somebody without a property at all.
Sure, it compounds, right? Like the richer you are, the richer you get.
Sure. Should we get into the thick of this?
I'm ready.
Cool.
Now, a lot of this is going to be around the kind of crime stats that you pulled up for us.
Yeah. So there's 4 sources where we've got this from. So one of them was the Office for National Statistics. The other one was government website, gov.uk. One was from the Met Police, UNICEF, and Trust for London, which is like a non-for-profit organisation that's been around since the 19th century. So anything that is stated is from one of those 5 sources, which are pretty legitimate sources. There was some from Sky News, but we decided not to include that, and we're just sticking to this. So
okay, let's kick things off. So the first one that I see on the list here is racially motivated hate crimes.
Yeah.
So 70% of hate crimes are racially motivated, and this is 4 times as much since 2012.
Yeah.
Right.
I thought that was a pretty impressive level of growth in hate crimes. Maybe impressive is the wrong word.
Those numbers are looking beautiful.
Hopefully these growth patterns continue.
I'm hoping we sustain this growth.
I'm impressed.
Let's be honest, Matt. We've done our part to bolster those numbers. If the comment section of our TikTok is anything to go by, we're contributing at least 10%.
Yeah, there's been a serious amount of hate crimes against us. Cheers, guys. But the viewers and the comments under that post have been getting seriously pressed about some of the things that we're going to discuss for you today, which is one of the reasons why we decided to make this pod and this episode. We're starting with hate crimes, but it gets better, don't you worry.
The people have spoken, and they want racially motivated hate crimes, so that's what we're going to give them.
We're going to just give statistics, and people can make their own kind of...
Well, the interpretation is really what people are looking out for.
I was a little disappointed with the amount of response that was just outwardly racist, to be honest.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I wish people would have a conversation about, like we were, about why those issues might be, rather than blaming it on, just blaming it on stupid things, or just saying like things without any point, just pure hate. There was a lot of that, which was kind of disappointing. I'm not gonna lie. I'd like to think that we live in a country now that's, more accepting, but
hey,
I understand it. I understand.
That is the internet.
Yeah.
And usually people with balanced, more well-informed opinions are smart enough to not engage in the rhetoric on TikTok in the first place.
Yeah.
If you are someone who's a bit more sensible and informed, you're not going to be like, I need to get on this fucking video and let people know my stupid opinion. You'll probably just be like, I probably want to just step out of this one. I don't really want to, right? So it's like a selection bias to begin with, where we're already filtering out for the kind of crazies.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so on this one, did you have any ideas for what's going on here?
I compared it to a school playground.
Okay.
So if somebody new comes into the school, right, if a child comes into the school, or if somebody's a little bit different at school as well, instantly they're targeted. I don't think that's a quality that's necessarily lost as you become an adult for a lot of people. If somebody's different, it makes them an easier target, which is one of the reasons, I imagine, why there's been a huge there's always been hate crimes, and 70% of hate crimes are racially driven. Nearly 98,000 hate crimes were committed in 2024 in the UK. And one of the reasons why I brought this up is because I think it's going to be really interesting. It doesn't make anything work. It doesn't make anything better, right? If we've already got this divide in the UK and different societies and different races are staying together and integrating less, and we're not adopting shared values as a nation potentially. You think by committing hate crimes, that's gonna be a solution that's gonna put us a step in the right direction? Absolutely not. It's just going to create more tension between everybody, which is why I found it interesting, because if the hate crimes are increasing, I'd imagine crimes against each different race are going to increase, right? If someone is an eye for an eye, which is really difficult kind of mindset to shake out of. So
it's getting worse. That's the big thing, right? 4 times as much as 2012.
Yeah.
Now, what are some of the things contributing to it getting worse?
Well, probably the fact that the amount of crime committed by each race it's not the same.
Okay, so you think, it's because it's not proportionate across different races?
Potentially.
I don't have the stats for that.
Well, it's not. We'll move on to that. I've got the office from the Met Police. The report from the Met Police in 2022.
Now, before we go on to that, so I'm thinking a few reasons why the hate crimes are going up. So integration is probably a big issue here, where you have a more multicultural nation, and now you've got a bigger clash between different backgrounds and cultures. And because it's so diverse, the difference in the cultures that you've got coming over, everything from Asian, Caribbean, American, I guess they integrate well with the UK, but let's say South American a bit more. Their cultures are usually so different that when you come here, rather than trying to bend your culture and way of living to the local country and to others, you're like, I'll just stick to what I know and how I like to live, and I'll just find other people who also like to do the same thing.
Well, the big one is language, isn't it? A lot of people that come over escape to be able to create a better life for themselves. You think they know 2 or 3 languages or speak fluent English? Most likely not. Is there a centralised culture especially in London? Is there? Because it's the most culturally diverse city in the world, London.
It's interesting that cultural diversity works in both ways, where you do have, I imagine, within, let's say, certain populations, maybe the younger demographics, people mixing a lot more. And then probably in the older demographics, you have even less mixing because of that. Because instead of thinking, I imagine, like in the past, let's say in early 2000s, when it wasn't as diverse, you'd come to the country and you wouldn't have the option of just staying with other people from your own background.
Yeah,
you had no other choice but to integrate because there was no one else. Yeah. Now you actually have that choice. You can be like, I can take the time and effort and shift how I think about things, how I live, to adapt to the local environment, or I'll just hang out with all my Asian buddies and we'll just continue doing what we were doing back home.
Yeah, because there's now communities.
There's now a community, right?
That have been set up, and they've massively grown over the last 10 days. People's families will come to join them, and unfortunately probably sponge off a lot of UK resources without contributing too much. I'm sure that happens, right? There's a huge amount of fraud, benefits fraud and everything, not only from Asian people, but everybody in the UK. It's a problem. Okay. That's something that I want to look into next.
Oh yeah?
Yeah,
okay.
Because I'm convinced of this from life experience.
All right, I'm curious to get into that. Okay, what about one other thing, right? And I saw this where, let's say the stats show that it's quadrupled in that time. What if the actual rate at which these hate crimes are occurring isn't going up, but just that they're being reported more often now, right? So it's like the statistics might not show the clear story. right? That's one angle. And then the other one is that what if now the media just reporting them more often as well? Because it's beneficial to whatever objective they have to kind of sow that dissent between communities and think, all right, all these races are now causing crime, they're doing all these things, and therefore the public ends up being more divided, and it's easier to then push through different policies because everyone's fractured.
Most of the media that I've seen surrounding racism is people trying to convince people. Some of it is just talking about the disproportions in kind of crime rates, but a lot of it is trying to kind of save, trying to steer people away from being racist. So I don't think media would actively try and create a divide against different races in the UK. I don't think they're trying to do that from what I've seen, which took in like the last hour when I was doing this research. But yeah, I don't think personally that media's, the reason why why hate crimes have increased or being kind of talked about more. I think if they've quadrupled in 10 years, that's pretty I need to say outstanding.
I keep saying these numbers are phenomenal.
Impressive, outstanding, phenomenal.
I bet that's not the kind of analysis the audience was expecting when
No.
they heard this. We can use these as quotes.
What's for the friendly fire comments coming very shortly.
All right.
Okay, let's move on to
Knife
the
crime,
next point. This is something that a lot of our viewers are interested in London, so I'll just read it out as it is. One thing that wasn't mentioned is that victims of knife murders in the UK, 45% were black Londoners, which is nearly half of the knife crime committed is, black people are the victims there, which is, it's just they're heavily involved within knife crime. All in all.
Again, stupendous numbers.
And
now the stat we shared, I don't know, was it last week or the week ago?
Yeah.
We got a little bit mixed up, but the accurate numbers are 13.5% of London's population is black, yet they make up 61% of knife murders and 45% of victims.
Yeah.
That one is spot on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we mix like the UK's black population.
Okay, now,
this is
your interpretation of this. Your interpretation of these figures.
How do I interpret these figures?
As in, what do you think about them? What is the root cause of what's going on here?
Well, we've already kind of touched on it. Like, I think music has a huge role to play. I know that was
the views were kind of mixed on this, saying, how can white people listen to rap and not do that?
Yeah, but they're less heavily involved with kind of like, if you look at the percentage of rappers that are black, they massively outweigh white rappers. You see a lot more.
And what does
look at Eminem being like a white rapper, and he just obviously is insanely talented, but there's a huge amount more of black rappers than there are of any other ethnicity that become hugely successful anyway, and the things that they talk about in that music are not things that should be encouraged, particularly among young people. The only other argument that I have for it, and some of our viewers were saying some crazy stuff. They're saying like black people. They were saying that black people are more
genetically predisposed to this.
Genetically predisposed, and their frontal lobe was less developed.
I know.
Which I don't believe. I'd have to see some research for that. But we were just picking apart statistics, and this is something I lost a load of friends over when I just said it. So that's kind of one of the things that sparked interest for me. Nationwide, it's slightly different. So outside of London, it's 36.5% white people that commit knife crime, 47% black, 11% Asian, and 2% other. Now, one thing to note in this report by the Met Police, this was in 2022, is that 30% of all these counts, race was not accounted for at all. As
in unreported?
Yeah, which is interesting.
Why do you think that is?
Maybe just because... Why would that not be? Surely they don't pick... Why would 70% be selected and 30% isn't? Surely it would just... If there must be a process which identifies people's race, so why would 30% not be recorded? I found that interesting.
You think there's some foul play going on by the police?
Maybe. I don't think so.
Numbers.
I don't think so, but that doesn't make sense to me. I don't know about you.
Yeah. I don't know how the data is collected or what the process is, so I can't say, do they have gaps in there? Is the data lost? Or are they just being selective about the kind of information they release? In which case, that's even more worrying.
Yeah, but that's nationwide. It's less so. Like, our statistics were focused on, London.
It'd be interesting to see the kind of adjacent stats for this around things like education and employment.
Well, we move on to poverty, so we may as well tackle this now. So this is from Trust for London, an organisation that's been running since the 19th century. I think it was 1891, and they're funded by people of London to research social justice issues. And black and minority ethnic groups are twice as likely to be in poverty than white people are.
Okay, so what are we thinking for reasons for that?
Well,
Well, I'll warm you up. So you don't have the history of generational wealth when you're coming in as a first or second generation immigrant, right? You don't have a long line of ancestors who have houses and wealth that gets passed down to you, and so you're essentially starting at complete zero, whereas the majority of people typically won't do that, right? Especially if you're a native. You've got some kind of support from parents, grandparents, or something. So already you're a little behind in that race.
I think that's... I imagine that immigrants to any country are going to be generally more impoverished than people that have lived there for a long time.
Sure.
Because to my understanding, a lot of the time white people move to a different country is to escape, to make a better life for themselves. So they're not starting with a load of money that they can just buy a house in. And obviously if you've not got a house and you live in council housing or cheap, flats, overcrowded flats, the chance of you having a snowball effect and all your family being surrounded by groups of people that are also going to be committing crime, you're the product of your surroundings, not earning that much, it's just going to make a snowball, and children's children will be in poverty, everything like that. So it's potentially harder for people to escape poverty as well. However, if you look at these statistics, 34%, so twice as likely than white people to be in poverty. But if you look at the UK population, it is majoritively white, so you've still got this huge amount of people that are white in poverty.
But wait, that stat makes sense, because what percentage of the country is... So 17% are in poverty, but what percentage of the UK is white?
81.
So it's almost bang on.
Well, how many? What do you mean?
As in... Oh wait,
I butchered that as well. But anyway, single pensioners, I found that interesting. Also face higher poverty, so there's obviously...
Single pensioners?
So, yeah, single pensioners, people that are old and without a spouse. I found that quite sad, 29%. Clearly a connection between inequality and outcomes. Another thing that we wanted to talk about, which is the thing that everyone's been kind of giving us hate for in the comments for some reason, is sexual assault. So should we get into the thick of this one?
Let's do it. I'm excited for this.
So, UK-wide, Met Police Report 2022.
Are you looking at the group-based numbers?
This is not yet. We're going to look into group-based. This is just sexual assault. Okay? So white people are responsible for 48% of sexual assault nationwide. Black people are responsible for 29.58%. Asian people are 16.95%, and other are 3.3%. So I don't see basically you've got, it's not going well for the blacks again.
Because do you have the proportionate number of how much they make up the country's population?
I nearly looked into that.
I have that.
Yeah?
I have that here. So for whites, they represent 82% of the UK population.
Yeah.
But only 48% of sexual assault.
Yeah.
Bit of a disparity.
Yeah.
Black people represent 4% of the UK's population and 30% of the total sexual assaults. And then Asians represent 9% of the UK population and 17%.
So there's still a disproportionate amount of Asian and black people like sexually assaulting people, but that probably goes hand in hand, a lot of it, with poverty.
Yeah, I mean, these figures on their own, I don't really know what conclusions you can draw from here.
No, we've not really looked into the reasons why they might be.
But that's what this is for, right? Because we're supposed to be digging into this to see what's going on
here.
Yeah. Now, of course, socioeconomic deprivation is probably a big one, where you don't have access to certain resources, and so poverty can make it, I won't say easier, but more likely for crimes to occur. But sexual assault is a weird one because it doesn't unlike other crimes like theft, fraud, or anything monetary related, it doesn't necessarily help you get out of the poverty situation, right? You can't necessarily justify it in the same way where you're like, I don't have job opportunities, I don't have any other qualifications, and so I got to go into crime and theft and do all these things because that's my only way of making a living, and I can kind of sympathize with that a little bit, right? But then what is the justification for something like sexual assault, even if you take into account the impoverished area?
Underdeveloped prefrontal lobes. I don't know. I think a lot of it's got to come from culture again. Like
right.
there's disproportionate amounts from Asian and black people. So part of it is wealth inequality. How much you can blame wealth inequality for those behaviours?
I'm not saying you can do much, really. You know, I don't know what is the justification.
By, I don't know. Like I'm fairly confident that the less wealth there is in an area, the more sexual assault there'll be. I think that would be fair to say.
Okay, I can see. All right, so I'm trying to reason my way here and think, if you don't have anything going for you in terms of...
Sorry, I was just Googling, is there a correlation between, what are we talking about?
Impoverished areas and sexual assault.
Yeah, impoverished areas and sexual assault, and it's like, is there a correlation between head size and intelligence?
And that's what let's do it, yeah. Fuck the stats.
That really made me laugh. Head size is closely correlated with brain size, and brain size is closely correlated with intelligence and memory. So if you've got a fat monster head at school and someone's taking the piss out of you, you're probably smarter than them. Anyway.
Alright, I'm glad we cleared that one up.
And sexual assault.
Yeah, I can see one reason being like, you know, if you don't have anything going on, like job prospects, education, then you feel like there's not as much consequence to you.
Yeah, there's an undeniable link between poverty and sexual assault. Poverty, this is from PCAR, National Institutes of Health. Yeah, it's clear. So wealth is one reason why anyone would be more likely to commit sexual assault, and you're more likely, as we've discussed, to be impoverished if you are an immigrant or if you come into the country and you're of a different ethnicity other than white. So that is one explanation, not saying that there aren't other explanations, right? So the other ones potentially stem from culture problems.
One thing that I came across was potentially some community silence and taboo around not reporting things that happen. Right, so this is why the grooming gangs went on for so long, right? Is because no one wanted to say anything. And you've seen it in other places, like in the church when they were fiddling kids. Yeah. Right? A lot of people knew about it, but because there's this sense of, oh, you don't want to be the one to speak out because
the repercussions would be massive, especially in those kind of cultures. So the grooming gangs was like there was a lot of Pakistani people committing those crimes, and it was the group grooming that was particularly a problem there. If say a woman spoke out in particular, because in my head a lot more women report crimes to the police than men.
Is that a fact?
No, but I'm sure of it, right? So let's just roll with this for a second. If you are involved in that Pakistani culture, if you're outspoken as a woman, what are the repercussions there as part of that culture? Because there's obviously such deep embedded sexualism. Is that the word?
Sexism.
Sexualism. So there's sexism is so deeply ingrained into so many different cultures, not just Pakistani culture, but like so many other ones, and that's probably one of the reasons why things aren't reported, because a lot of the time women are more empathetic than men. They might be more likely to care if these things are going on than men will be within a community.
It's true. Yeah, I haven't seen the data to back it up, but logically that makes sense.
Yeah, this was just one of my free rolling arguments, but
Half-baked.
looking at the statistics for that, so the group-based cases, 85% of group-based child abusers are white, and this is from Sky News in January 2025.
We'll allow it. It's better than no data.
Yeah, so Sky News, 85% of group-based child abusers were white. Out of the 28,556 total child abuse offences, only 3% were actually group-based. So the most amount of child abuse and child grooming cases are actually not group-based. So even though there is an undeniable relationship, so with Pakistani origin offenders, they accounted for 13.7% of the group-based abusers, but they account for 2.5% of the population. Obviously, that is a massive disparity. But then, if you look at the total, there's 30 times more child abuse offences that are not group-based.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just taking one tiny proportion out of the data and just focusing on it so much because maybe people want a reason to clutch onto something to spread that hatred. Because man, the word Paki has been around. I got called Paki in school. I'm sure you've had your fair share of racism. What the fuck is that?
The robot had something to do with that. You're using some foul language.
Racist. Yeah, so the word Paki's been around for ages, and people have said it to me, obviously in not very nice ways. Does not bother me at all, but it's been around before all these child grooming cases came out, and I think people are potentially looking for a crutch here to stand on when only 1 out of 30 child abuse offences are group grooming, and admittedly that is not majoritively, disproportionately committed by Pakistani people. But if you look at the bigger picture, it's a tiny substrate of the data which people are potentially looking to jump onto.
Now, this is going to lead nicely into some of these stats we pulled out on child marriage.
Yeah.
Right? So the numbers I've got here are 24%. So 1 in 4, we can say, a quarter of women married before 15.
Yeah.
That's a pretty crazy stat.
This is from UNICEF as well.
So what is going on here?
It's a culture. It's a culture problem.
You think it's a problem?
Well, yeah. If people are getting married before turning 15, I'd assume they don't have much of a say in it a lot of the time, which is a problem.
Yeah. The cultural kind of implication is that it's something about purity of a woman, right? That's one of the things that drives it. It's like you have to get married to keep your purity intact.
Really?
But the other one being that when you get older, you become less compliant.
Oh, really?
Right? Because then your brain and your reasoning is developed and strong enough for you to be able to say, hold on, this is bullshit. Why would I do this?
So that's a problem. That right there is a problem. I don't think you can make an informed decision of because these girls will be marrying people that are probably in their 30s as well.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of them will most likely receive some kind of abuse, some way, shape or form. They're probably raped.
It'll be interesting to see these stats correlated with education levels.
Yeah.
Because usually when you have stuff like this where women are being married off at an early age, or when women are having lots of children, it correlates pretty strongly with female education rate. And that's why in places where, for example, the Taliban is still has a strong presence, one of the things they'll ban is women's education specifically.
Really?
Because what happens when you educate someone, you teach them well, the ability to think and reason, and then they start to realize, hold on a second, my circumstance, I don't have to accept it in the way that it is. And someone becomes a lot harder to make them do what you want.
Yeah, man. Can you imagine somebody growing up without an education? Like, without any form of education, how much less aware you would be of everything. And your ability to think, like, from nursery, we're given these activities to develop our way of thinking about things like problem solving, critical thinking, language. If you learn more than one language, you know that opens up different parts of your brain and it allows you to reason more before thinking. But all of these are part of an education, and when you deprive somebody from that, that's an insane thing to think about.
Yeah, this is actually one thing that I'm also a strong kind of believer in impoverished areas. The biggest thing often holding these places back from development is women's education, because the knock-on consequences of women not getting education is so vast. It's like you can't, for the start, make reasonable decisions about what you want to do with your life because you're always child rearing, right? Because if you haven't had education, most likely you're treated as a housewife that needs to just rear children. So you're either pregnant or you're raising kids, and that in itself means you're now completely cut off from society. You have one single job to do, and there's no other option. It also means you can't explore other ways to contribute to that community. You can't get a higher education, you can't go towards jobs, or the entire basically community or nation even stops developing because half your population doesn't have an education and can't contribute. So even if we look at it from the non-personal side and just purely economical, it's not a sensible idea to have half your population uneducated and simply staying at home as human birthing machines.
It's just a set way of thinking about things that people accept because they've been around for so long.
And I can see it making sense maybe like 1,000 years ago when you lived in a village and you were like, there isn't really anything else to do. There's no education or place to travel to. So you, as a woman, you would grow up and you would have children, and that would be kind of your role, right?
Yeah, but also people would have grown up a lot quicker then. You know what I mean?
Why is that?
Well, they'd be surrounded by death and traumatic events that would have shaped them as people.
You mean like war and poverty?
War, poverty, infection.
No, that was
Huh?
that was me being ironic.
Oh, right. Well, you know, like even things like infection and, you know, like...
I think that's a myth. I think growing up quicker is a myth.
No chance. They would have had to be been ingrained into society and there wouldn't have been room to just sit around and do jack shit when you're 12. You would have been working. You would have been doing some hard graft.
Sure, you'd have
that
to.
That in itself would make you grow up a lot quicker than these 11, 12-year-olds now that are just dossing about in school all day.
Mate, but we're not comparing them to Western children, right? We're comparing them to current day women in like impoverished countries. So what does a day in the life of an average Indian kid look like?
Yeah, sure.
Well, you're probably out scavenging for food all day, struggling to make enough to get a meal to eat.
And they'll grow up quicker than people. So we've both agreed that when you face challenging circumstances, that allows you to grow, and you know, a lot quicker than you would if you hadn't been through those circumstances. Yeah.
Agreed,
So challenges make you grow a lot quicker. So if you're growing up an impoverished child at the age of 12 compared to a child that's been mollycoddled his whole life at the age of 12 in the UK, their levels of maturity are obviously going to be very different, and maturity essentially is how quickly you grow up for your age.
So let's take the logical extension of this. Let's say you're a child who's grown up in a third world country, right? And now you come to the UK after, let's say, you're 15 years old. How easy is it for you to adapt to life here?
Difficult.
Very difficult,
right?
Because the cultural expectations of modern day life in a Western country are so different to some of the challenges you might face in an undeveloped nation like scavenging for food, right?
I know who would struggle more though. A 50-year-old kid who got sent to an impoverished country and had to scavenge around for food.
Sure, but
we should set up a game show.
We'll
rich country,
swap.
poor country. Have you seen Rich House, Poor House?
I haven't.
We'll do rich country, poor. There's where this if you've not got any money, you don't come from money. Within the UK, you swap places with like a child from like a millionaire.
I've seen it done with school before.
Really?
Where they swap schools.
That would be interesting. I've seen one where they got sent to India for it.
What a kid.
Yeah, it was like world's toughest schools. So 3 kids
Yeah.
that were rebellious within the UK got sent over to India.
How did they fare?
Not great. One of them got a lot better. He was kind of studying. I think he was just not particularly intelligent, so he struggled to focus and things like that because he didn't really have much cognitive ability. So he did okay because their way of teaching worked a lot better for him. Wasn't distracted by his classmates. Pretty tough to focus in a school environment in today's world. Like in the classes that I taught, some of them were awful. Well, you couldn't get a word in, especially at the start when I first started.
So those kids that got sent over, they were a little problematic, right?
Yeah.
Why did they end up that way?
Environmental factors, and yeah.
You don't. Well, I would personally put it down to incompetent parenting.
Majoritively, yes.
Right? Because
Yeah.
sure, it's a little bit of a blanket statement, but for the most part, as a parent, if you're willing to do the difficult things, you can get your child in line more or less.
If those kids were raised by the world's best parents, let's take it to the extreme,
Yeah.
they wouldn't be like that.
That's right.
So that means that it is the parents' fault to an extent, right? So it's not. It's maybe not their fault. It's maybe not out of purpose, out of choice, and they didn't do it deliberately. But they've done things that they could have done better with those children, and they're usually the tough things that you don't want to have to do as a parent.
You're speaking from experience here, Matt.
Saying no. I don't know. From what I've seen and been surrounded by, so shouting at kids is something I really don't like.
It's a poor move, right? Because you never want to be in a volume match with a kid, because it means you've lost all other resources and now you're resorting to just yelling, which is a last-ditch effort.
If that doesn't work, you're done. Unless you want to beat them.
Which
Most people don't.
exactly.
Me included. But once you've raised your voice, like, I think there's a time and a place. Okay? I think there's a time and a place, and if you're sending it, you got to full send it. Shut up! Listeners just like...
Man, it's like an art, right? It's easy to sit here and talk about it, but who knows how tough it is when it's your actual kid and it's crying and you don't enjoy how it feels.
It'd be really horrible. It'd be tough.
Right?
It'd be so hard.
It's so easy to tell someone, hey, your kid's like being a little prick, shut him up. Right? And then
Can you imagine the backlash from the parents?
all right, I guess it's not that easy to say that either. But like, if it was your own kid, you would feel it a lot more trying to make that happen, because then obviously you're not a psychopath.
That's part of being like the man or woman that you need to be. You need to act selflessly to better your child.
And this is one thing we haven't touched on before.
Parenting.
About specifically the male-female dynamic within parenting, because I know one of the reasons for some of these stats that we've been talking about is that the family structure is incomplete, right? And so I'm curious, what do you think is going on with the dynamics of having both parents present that affects the child's development?
Let's make it next week's episode.
Okay, guys, tune in next week. We're going to get to the root of this problem.
Sweet.
Peace.